Man and Gods of Battle. Chapter 1 Battle of Waterloo. Stuart was a man who had a family. They lived with him in the mountains where he trained as a ninja. One day while he was training, a giant monster named Zerga came and attacked his family, and they were taken and missing from his mountain. Stuart felt much pain about this, so he hurried after them. Stuart was trained in the way of the ninja and was very skilled with a blade. As he left the mountain, he was attacked by an undead army, 1 million undead warriors who served the giant demon. Stuart pulled his legendary blue snake ninja sword, which was given to him by his father, who was also a legendary ninja. Stuart smirked. "You should have brought more men," he said while twirling with his blue snake ninja sword, and he quickly dispatched the undead army before him. "Ha," Stuart said. "You cannot defeat me, I'm too strong." Then Stuart punched the floor and the mountain split in half, and Stuart glided down and landed perfectly on the ground and continued on after the giant monster. Stuart met 2 men named Lee and Nathan as he was traveling down the road. "I see you were quite skilled with a blade," said Lee. Nathan smiled. "I am very impressed by your sword skill, ninja. I bet you could defeat us both easily if you wanted," said Nathan. Stuart just said yeah because they were right. Lee asked Stuart to join the army and help fight against the undead evil that was filling this land, so Stuart said yeah. The next day Stuart was now leading the army and planned to attack a castle that the giant demon had fled to. Chapter 2 Battle at Bide Hall. The undead were getting stronger, so Stuart taught all of Lee and Nathan's men how to fight with a sword, but he could not teach them how to fight as a ninja because only a few people can fight like that. "A demon attacked their camp while they were training. I'll handle this," said Nathan as he charged at the undead monster. Nathan was fighting really well and managed to slash the monster's arm, but the monster was too powerful and knocked Nathan to the ground. Lee came over and attacked the monster but was beaten back and fell to the ground as well. The monster lifted its foot over the 2 beaten men just as Stuart jumped over the monster and slashed its neck. The monster gave out a cry and fell down dead. Stuart helped Nathan and Lee to their feet. "Wow, how did you manage to defeat the monster so easily, Stuart?" "You're like Achilles," Lee said, smiling. Stuart just nodded and they began to prepare for the first attack. Later that evening a woman came up to Stuart and said, "I'm Aphrodite. I worked as a servant at this tower long before the undead came. I fear this battle may take many lives of good men and I don't want to lose anyone else I care about." Even though they had just met, Stuart and Aphrodite felt a burning passion between them. So Stuart took off her clothes and she had an amazing body. Stuart began to rub his fingers up and down her lips and she became very wet and climbed on top of him. The next morning Lee came into the room and said, "The undead are attacking Stuart. You should take Aphrodite and leave this place. Without you the world is doomed." Stuart was speechless. He looked down at his blue ninja sword and decided that Lee was right, so he left the battle. Chapter 3 A Heroic Retreat. Stuart spent the next 2 weeks traveling on the road alone. As he was walking past a town he saw thousands of undead attacking. They all had really long sticks with spikes at the end of them and they were poking the villagers to death with them. Stuart wouldn't stand for this, so he pulled out his blue snake ninja sword and helped slay the undead. A skeleton ran at Stuart, but Stuart flipped it over his shoulder and began to slice at the undead horde. They dropped by the hundreds and began to retreat. "My boy," said the village elder coming out to greet Stuart. "I have never seen anything like that. How did you manage to defeat so many undead?" Stuart just smiled and said, "I was trained by my father, who was a ninja and very skilled at what he could do with a blade. He taught me how to fight like a ninja, and the undead don't know any other fighting styles, so they lose easy." The villagers began to clap and they had a party that evening. Stuart was standing alone that night on the balcony and a woman came outside and stood with him. "You saved a lot of lives tonight, Master Ninja," the woman said, leaning in closer to Stuart while placing her hand on top of his. Stuart removed her hand from his as thoughts of his family flooded his mind. "Oh, you're that way?" the woman said, looking at him. "No, I like girls. But now it's about justice," Stuart said, finishing his drink and jumping from the balcony. Chapter 4 I don't know what the fuck's going on. Stuart continued his one-man war across South Shields, slaying undead by the hundreds. 2 beautiful women came running over to Stuart. "Master Ninja, you look tired from battle. Please allow us to treat your wounds." Stuart nodded and headed back to their tent where they made love all night, and one of the women said, "Stuart, you're just like Jesus, I feel a second coming." Stuart just said yeah because they were right. In the morning Stuart met up with Lee and the other troops. Stuart, the undead, killed Lord Nathan. They showed that they knew more love for the sword than he, and he was defeated last night. Stuart felt his anger renew and said, "I will kill the undead." Lee and turned his back on Lee and started to walk away. "No, my lord, you can't. You can't just throw your life away, the world needs you." Stuart pushed Lee aside and said, "I will do as I like." Just at that moment a flaming arrow flew across and hit Lee in the temple, setting his head alight. "No one!" cried Stuart in great pain. Stuart looked over and it was undead Nathan who had fired the arrow. "You will join us," Stuart said, Nathan pulling his sword and charging Stuart. Stuart blocked all of his attacks and said, "You don't know how to fight like a ninja, so you die now." And Nathan was dead. All of a sudden a dark mage flew down from the sky and said, "Let's see if you can beat this opponent," and cast a dark portal on the ground, and a figure emerged from the portal, and the mage said, "This is a samurai from another world, you will not defeat him." Then figure had brown hair and held a red dragon sword that had red and black strips like a tiger. The figure attacked Stuart but fell down, and Stuart said, "You should have known that a ninja is a samurai's weakness," and the figure cried out in pain and died, and the mage tried to fly away but was hit with a ninja star and died. Chapter 5 Meow Meow, I Am a Cat. As Stuart stood victorious over the battlefield, a blinding light appeared before him and God himself came down from the sky and said, "Stuart, you are the greatest warrior that has ever lived." All Stuart could really say was yeah, because he was right. "Would you do me the honor of fighting me?" Stuart agreed, and the two warriors drew their swords and began to fight. They were fighting like warrior poets when God got his arm and leg cut and fell down, and Stuart said, "You don't know how to fight like a ninja, and unless you fight like a ninja you cannot defeat me." God said yeah because he knew Stuart was right. Then God said, "Stuart, I want you to take over from me and rule over the world and the stars." And Stuart said, "No, I must fight the undead." And God looked at Stuart and said, "No, Stuart, you are the undead." And Stuart was a zombie. Fin.